Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Chats with Chaudhry. I hope you're safe and well. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Edward Kelley, who I'm going to call Ed for the rest of this interview, who is the Chief Health Officer for ApiJect. And today, we are going to be talking about syringe reuse. So, Ed, lovely to see you. How are you?
Pleasure to see you, Rizwan. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. And where are you calling in from this afternoon?
Yeah, I'm joining from just outside Geneva, where ApiJect has its global office, and for about 13 years, I was the lead of integrated health services for the World Health Organization.
Fantastic. Well, actually, you've already answered one of my first questions, I think. So I was going to ask you if you could give me a quick background on yourself and also ApiJect. So if you don't mind expanding on that a little bit and also about ApiJect, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, for me, I have worked for the U.S. government as both domestically for the Health and Human Services Department, as well as with U.S. Agency for International Development for a whole bunch of years around the world, and then took a position with the World Health Organization and worked there leading work on injection safety, patient safety, and integrated health services. And it was really only with COVID that I started looking at how it could personally have more of an impact. I mean, anyway, we're still stuck in it, but a couple of years in, we're still pushing back against this big outbreak. And I joined ApiJect because I really felt they had this game-changing approach to vaccination, and that would be not just for COVID, but for the future. So that's part of the reason for the change. And I think there's a lot of pressure right now to make that change happen quicker than we need to.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for giving that quick overview. So let's talk about syringe reuse. Now, I understand there's been a disruption in the production of I can't even get my dentures right. Let me try and say this properly. Polypropylene. So how has that impacted the global supply chain and the making of disposable syringes?
Well, it's important. That question of disruption of polypropylene is important in its own right, because polypropylene is used to make lots of stuff, from clothing to lots of different packaging. And it's also important as an illustration of what COVID is teaching us about supply chain. So it's been one of the big disrupted basic materials out there. You can see prices for polypropylene up about 40% over the last year in many places. And that's both because of transport issues and some of the questions around supply chains that we've had, but also because of certain issues in parts of the world, like, for instance, southern US, Texas, Louisiana, that are very cold spring and had disruptions in terms of production. But, if you take a step back and look at it as an example of what's going on in COVID, you have disruptions in a lot of different ways. There's been transport disruptions where you've had early on in the pandemic where you had the China shutdown and it disrupted access to basic materials. Also, the health workforce that ships a lot of these things around the world. You've got trade restrictions where countries getting angry with each other over vaccines and other issues have shut down trade. And you've also had demand restraint. A lot of manufacturers are hedging their bets around what they're willing to invest in and spend money producing. And so therefore, in terms of what they're demanding, and all of those you've seen with production on vaccines, but polypropylene is extremely important in the sense that we are now heading into really the big push on the vaccination campaign globally. And we're going to need that polypropylene for syringes and for other packaging to get it out there.
Right. Okay. So what surprised you the most this year, though, about the World Health Community's response to COVID-19?
Yeah, that's a good question. But I think what surprised me the most was how surprised everyone has been about everything that's happened.
Right.
If you know what I mean, there's been one new thing this past year, and that is COVID. It's a new virus, but everything else that has happened has really just been COVID shining this bright, hot spotlight on the existing cracks that we have in our health systems and our political systems. And, the issues about underinvestment in supply chain, underinvestment in syringes. We've also underinvested in outbreak response. We spent a lot of time looking at predicting the next forest fire, meaning, sort of preparedness and mapping out who's going to be most prepared without investing enough in the fire departments and the real response. And you could see that in countries with lots of means, like the US and UK, and then countries with fewer means, like Vietnam and Thailand. But I guess two sort of big real true surprises for me that was a bit one good, one bad. It's been the fastest development in history of public health on new vaccines, and that has really been surprising. But I think the surprise that we haven't taken that next step beyond just putting vaccines on tarmacs and really thinking about safe injections in arms, that has been a big surprise, and we've got a long way to go on it.
Right. Well, that leads nicely actually to my next question, which is, what is your chief concern regarding syringe reuse?
Well, syringe reuse, two big concerns. It's going to be big, and we're ignoring it. Those are my two big concerns. WHO says, my team investigated this, and we worked on it in 2015 and onward, that over 1 million people die a year in normal times because of the infections they get at the end of dirty syringes that have been reused with multi-dose vials. And those are infections like HIV, like hepatitis. Now, with the world's biggest vaccination campaign, we're basically more than doubling the number of injections we're doing in a year. We're doing it very fast without enough investments in the systems that would support it. So we could see 2 to 3 million people dead eventually from this campaign unless we fix this problem. And it's being ignored. Many countries are donating doses right now, but they're not donating syringes. The COVAX, the world's vaccination platform for COVID, is funding and working hard. A lot of colleagues of mine working hard on getting doses, but there are separate mechanisms for syringes, and those mechanisms scramble for them. And no one's really talking about it globally. We ignored syringe reuse prior to the HIV pandemic. And then we realized we infected millions of people with HIV and hepatitis over the years. And this one could be much worse.
I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I mean, just as a layperson, I have to be honest. I mean, I used to work in healthcare many years ago, and syringe reuse was an issue then. But I thought because of the issues around HIV and hepatitis, it had sort of disappeared, and it was now standard practice not to reuse syringes. So I'm quite surprised that there is still a large amount of syringe reuse going on.
Yeah, we've made progress. That's no doubt about it. And this is one of the big things that efforts like PEPFAR and other UNAIDS did put emphasis on. But it's really faded, one, from that agenda. And secondly, the factors that really drove syringe reuse, which is lack of syringes and also lack of means in the developing world, are still there. So my team investigated one of the biggest recent outbreaks in 2019 in Ratadero, Pakistan, where 900 people were infected with HIV, many of them children. And most of the parents recounted that they went to the physicians that they got these immunizations from. They weren't able to pay for a new syringe. In many parts of the world, you can get free healthcare, but for anything you need, medicine, syringes, equipment, you have to pay for it. They didn't have the money to pay for it. So if you didn't, the syringe came out of the garbage can or out of the tray and was reused. If you could pay for it, you got a new syringe. So those are still the realities in many parts of the developing world. So the conditions are still ripe for syringe reuse that we haven't addressed over the years.
Right. All right. Well, thank you for sharing that story. That's quite scary, actually. So, I mean, your name was in a recent Washington Post op-ed piece, which was with several distinguished authorities, warning about the increases in syringe use leading to spreading of diseases and fatalities and the distrust of vaccines. So what is the big opportunity here? Can is there something positive that can come out of this?
I think so. And I mean, first of all, it was just to take a minute, it was a great opportunity to be with my former Director General, Margaret Chan, and a bunch of others. Victor Zhao was president of the National Academies of Medicine, Thomas Zeltner, former DG in Switzerland, Jeremy Hunt, former foreign minister and health minister, and Ashish Jha, who's dean of Brown Public Health School. But the big opportunity that we all felt we had in putting this on the agenda was, one, to once and for all underscore that access to whatever is not in the sort of WHO's or the world's interest. It's got to be access to safe care. But the immediate work that I think we have is, and the opportunity we have, is to really rethink immunization as part of a broader agenda, as part of changing health systems and changing sort of society. Immunization Agenda 2030, IA 2030, and your listeners can go and look that up. That, before COVID, was the roadmap for how immunization could help really drive change in health systems around the world, and it literally put immunization at the pointy end of a new primary healthcare system and the UN development goals. But in order to do that, we need to bring immunization to the community where they live and work. And that's what's holding us back now in COVID. How we were able to change the way people thought about influenza immunization, how we were able to make workplaces a place of immunization, how to make pharmacies a place of immunization, were that we had to come with a simpler approach to vaccination. And that really meant single dose prefilled syringes. That's how we did it. And we need to do that for COVID, both for countries in the Northern Hemisphere that are struggling with reaching reticent communities, and for countries in the Southern Hemisphere. So secondly, that will also allow us to come across the next big hurdle, which is that we will never have enough health workers to get the COVID vaccination done. Right now, COVID has to be, the COVID vaccines have to be administered by health workers. We will never have enough health workers to vaccinate the world. We need to get to the point where communities, community health workers, social workers are able to carry out these immunizations. And again, that has to be in a simpler presentation form than these multi-dose vials and also the syringes that we have. So that also argues for single dose prefilled syringes.
Well, you might have already preempted this with your answer just about, but what steps should be taken now to positively impact the future? I mean, what do you find encouraging? What can we do right now to have a positive impact?
Well, I think there's two things. On syringe reuse, we really said that we have two priorities. I mean, I outlined something I feel is sort of the future of immunization in general, and something we can start on right now with these single-dose prefilled syringes and getting community health workers administering them. But we really need to massively ramp up on syringes. It's a very opaque market. It's hard to understand what's available out there, right. But we are seeing and already hearing reports that agencies responsible for procuring syringes are having trouble. So we need to ramp up on these syringes and pre-position them to facilitate the global vaccination effort. And we need to invest in the health workforce. WHO has been saying that for decades, but this is an opportunity to really change the game on that. But in terms of the medium term on what comes next, I think we need to think long and hard about what will really make a difference. There's been a lot of talk around intellectual property and giving countries access to manufacture vaccines. It's not that that is undesirable, but the feasibility of that happening in the short term to create big disseminated vaccine manufacturing around the world is just not there. And there's lessons that show that it's not something that happens quickly, but it's much more feasible and probably more desirable to give countries control of the part of the vaccine supply chain that matters most, the end of it, the fill and finish portion of it, and to build that capacity. So in the same way that we try to put communities in charge of their own immunization programs, putting countries in charge of the fill and finish and the final stages of the supply chain is something that private sector and public partners could come together around.
Brilliant. Well, Ed, I know that's all we've got time for, but I appreciate taking time to talk to me today. It's been really interesting. And I could ask you lots more questions and we could go right off the main topic based on your background, but we won't do that. We'll keep it to that. So where can people get more information though, if they'd like to know more about this particular area, about the shortages of syringes and the sort of solutions around that?
They can, there is the op-ed piece that we put out, which was in the Washington Post. I'm more than happy to get contact from some of your listeners with Kelley at ApiJect.com. And we have a number of pieces on our website, on ApiJect's website, ApiJect.com, whole set that looks at syringe shortages, that looks at syringe reuse and injection safety, and really reviews the literature. Thankfully, I was able to slip a few of my own articles in there too, so that's good.
Fantastic. Well, we'll put the links to all of those above the video so people can access them instantly, and also get in touch with you. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time out to share your knowledge with me and your thoughts on that. It's really, really interesting. So thank you very much, Ed.
Thanks so much, Rizwan. It's really a pleasure, and hope to do it again soon.
I look forward to it. And viewers, so there you go. You've had an expert telling you all about the shortages around syringes and some of the ways that we can overcome those particular challenges. If you've got any comments for Ed based on what he's spoken to about today, then please put them below the video. I'm sure he'll be only delighted to see what your comments are and your views. And if you've got any questions, please share them as well. And if you'd like to know more as well, you can contact Ed directly. The email address is there, or you can check out the links above the video as well. So all that's going to say is, Ed, thank you very much once again. And thank you everybody for watching. I hope you found that useful. And until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.